Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unicorn Company podcast. I know I don't put out standard podcast episodes as often as I used to, as my life has been getting more and more chaotic over the past year, with the Herculean effort to review the Force Packs that were put out by Catalyst in the Mercenaries Kickstarter, as well as keeping up with the release schedule, including the Black Remnant Force Pack, the second Star League Force Pack, the Davian Heavy Battle Lance, and the Davian Cavalry Lance. Today, I'll be talking about a couple different subjects, but first I want to cover the news around Catalyst. I guess that is one of the subjects. I'll try to take a page from a podcast I listen to often, and probably too often when I work, the Well, There's Your Problem podcast, and be releasing this through Spotify and whatever platforms it links me to, as well as making a version of the podcast with slides for release on YouTube. And also for the early release on Patreon without the ads, YouTube likes to download things down with. And of course, I'm assuming Spotify does the same thing, as they are always hitting me with ads when I listen to music or podcasts. If you would like to access the podcast and YouTube videos ad-free, then you can become a patron at patreon.com/unicorncompany. I'm still looking at how to upload the backlog without just dumping everything on people at once, so we'll figure that out soon. Now, let's get into the news. Okay, so I'm a bit behind where I want to be on this, but we have had a few different things going on recently. The first of these is Force Packs out the wazoo. This began with the release of the Black Remnant and Star League Force Packs, which I've covered on the YouTube channel. Catalyst has also recently released the House Davian Heavy Battle Lance Force Pack, with the House Davian Cavalry Lance Force Pack also coming out recently, and we covered all of these on the channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm hoping I remembered to put a link in the corner for you to see all of the reviews on them, as well as these products are just pretty awesome, even if I don't know much about the Black Remnant. We should also be seeing the release of the Kurita Force Pack sometime soon. Catalyst has also made an announcement recently about the upcoming tariffs on Chinese products, which is now 54% if I remember correctly, and how they'll be addressing the effects of that these tariffs have on the products they have produced in China. Some people out there, some fans, and a lot of rage bait grifters have claimed all sorts of things, from this being a money grab on Catalyst's part to ineptitude, and even that CGL is using the tariffs as a baseless claim to raise prices. Though I am guessing that they don't actually know how tariffs work. I would like to refute that point right now, especially given that recently at the Gamma trade show, BattleTech is selling ahead of everyone except for Warhammer 40k, which I think says a lot about the position that CGL and BattleTech currently hold in the miniatures market. Most of these people who make these claims use cherry-picked portions of the statement, or probably think tariffs are paid by the exporting country and not the importing country, so I would like to read that entire statement now. Like many of you, the Catalyst Game Labs team has been watching recent economic events. We have been hard at work developing strategies that would make our position more resilient to the rapidly changing world trade dynamics that we have been seeing. Like much of the tabletop gaming industry, Catalyst gets hit especially hard by trade tariffs. Our industry is inherently international in nature. We are lucky that we have been able to be flexible with pricing in the past decade. However, recent changes with the market have shown us that our flexibility was not quite prepared for a change of this magnitude. With the current level of economic uncertainty, we have to make some tough decisions. In the next 60 days, we will be releasing a comprehensive update for this process, including some unfortunately necessary price adjustments. These price adjustments will be applied to new products and product reprints that are directly affected by tariffs. As we adjust to this new situation, we will likely expand this policy across our entire product line in order to average out increases. We are working hard to ensure that we can keep or even improve our value contribution to you and your game tables. We have prided ourselves on maintaining our relationship with you and your local game stores throughout Catalyst Game Labs' history, and we will hope to continue that trend in the years to come. The CGL team would like to thank you for sticking with us as we all work through this uncertain future together. We are happy to share our games with all of you and want to see our community grow through a shared love of IPs and games we steward. Now, before I go on to the other scripted part here, I do want to mention that Steve Jackson Games has also put out a similar statement, and Gamma put out a statement. These were public. I found these out through Bishop Steiner's Facebook posts, and of course, some people have called that political. Math is not political, okay? I know that some people are out there like, well, this is a Democrat-Republican thing or something like that. No, this is totally a math thing. Now, without jumping to conclusions or resorting to the rage bait from certain creators, what does this statement really tell us? To boil it down to the key components, it says that Catalyst is going to be affected by tariffs. Catalyst will have to raise prices to account for the associated cost of these tariffs. And it looks like they are going to try to spread it out over their entire product line as a way to try to mitigate the impact of them. So that while prices of products will be going up, the sticker shock hopefully won't be as hard as if they had been isolated only to the products directly affected by them. Of course, if you want my full opinion about the tariffs and how they will affect prices, there's a little thing in the corner, hopefully, if you're watching on YouTube. And to paraphrase Herb Bias from quite a few years ago, I have a video for that. You know what, though? This episode isn't about the announcement of the increase in prices due to tariffs, though it may be something worth exploring again, as I talked about it a bit in that previous video. And also, I did forget to mention BattleTech Gothic. I've covered this in decent detail. That was announced, and I believe they said the MSRP on that is looking at $100. I believe that was before the 54% tariffs were announced, though. So we will see. Hopefully they kind of priced it to absorb that. But today, I want to talk about something that nobody wants to defend. I want to talk about the Rakshasa. Now, I know that some of you will immediately recoil as the Rakshasa has been painted as a pale imitation of a far superior machine. And the mech does have some shortfalls, especially when compared to the mech it tried to emulate. For starters, let's take a look at the mech in a way that is, well, different from how it's been depicted. When the clans came a-knocking in 3050, well, 3048 if you were in the Oberon Confederation or any of the other bandit kingdoms core of the Inner Sphere, they showed up with some of the most terrifying machines that anyone had ever seen. They had weapons that could reach farther and do more damage. They had armored infantry that could tear a mech to pieces in no time flat. And they had warriors who, on average, were better trained than the ones in the Inner Sphere. So what do you do? Well, like anyone who's being invaded by outsiders with superior weapons, you try to adapt. There are multiple instances of this happening in history. It happened when castles gave way to star forts, when wooden ships became clad in iron, when steel behemoths crossed the trenches of World War I, and when the clans came to re-establish the Star League. Though that last part does deserve an episode all of its own. Historically, this has usually led to the copying or salvaging of weapons and equipment from the aggressors when possible. And the Inner Sphere did much the same. And we saw the effect of this all the way into the FedCom Civil War with mechs like the Thanatos and Hauptmann. But the early and middle part of the clan invasion gave us multiple mechs which have their genesis from this concept. This includes the Penetrator and Black Hawk Coup, or KU I guess, but I prefer to call it Coup, as different interpretations of the Black Hawk, or Nova. The Bushwhacker and Avatar both owe their existence to the Vulture, And the Rakshasa was developed with information gleaned from battlefield records and salvaged from the Mad Cat. To understand the Rakshasa's origin, we have to understand the Mad Cat. The Mad Cat, or as the followers of Kerensky would call it, the Timberwolf, is itself a derivative design with its origins from the Woodsman. The mech was designed to do what the Woodsman attempted, where the Woodsman would attempt to be a speedy, heavy mech through the use of Myomer acceleration signal circuitry, which I'll call MASC from now on. It came with liabilities on the battlefield. The Mad Cat would simply use an extra light engine. This change pushed the normal top speed of the mech to 86 kilometers an hour, which the Woodsman could only do in short bursts. These mechs were both quite similar, especially if you compare their primary weapon loadouts. Unlike the Woodsman, though, with a more reliable top speed and not needing to worry about a crucial system breaking down, which would cripple the mech in the middle of a battle, the Mad Cat was able to carry a similar weapons payload, with more effective armor, and would spread throughout the clans. This machine would become synonymous with the clans, and when the Federated Commonwealth saw this, they thought that with the combined military-industrial complex of the Lyran Commonwealth and the technological prowess of the New Avalon Institute of Science, they could, and for their survival needed, to copy it, not only in an effort to fight the clans on equal footing, but also, at least as far as I believe, as a way to better understand the threat to their nation and the inner sphere as a whole. This effort was spearheaded through a partnership with General Motors, who not only had a reputation for building some of the best and most iconic battle mechs in the inner sphere, with a few Cybertruck-like hiccups, and also had a chassis so perfectly suited to the job that it was almost obvious. One of the most iconic machines in history, which already shared a similar loadout, and which House Merrick had already modified into a much similar and, dare I say, possibly superior loadout in 3039. The Marauder. The Marauder was the perfect subject for this. Regardless of whether the Commonwealth was aware, the design had already been modified in the past by the Free Worlds League in 3039 with the MAD-4X. The 4X was, at its core, a Marauder, but took steps to take it from a long-range sniper to a short to mid-range brawler by stripping out all of its original weapon systems and replacing them with a pair of SRM-6 launchers, one in each side torso, and a binary laser in each arm. While the design itself was more of a test bed more than anything else, and some would say that because it never entered full production, a dead end, it did eventually give us the MAD-9M and 9M2, which took the original concept to its logical conclusion. And these wouldn't see the battlefields of the Inner Sphere until 3068, and which unfortunately adopted a use of an Inner Sphere extra light engine, ruining what could have been two of the most perfect designs. Getting back to the main subject though, we know that an effective twin missile launcher arm-mounted energy weapon Marauder variant could have worked. In fact, this could have simply been built as a Marauder variant, and this was not to be. Instead of modifying the Marauder to be more effective, to use the technology, they had to not only make the machine heat efficient, but also make it hit harder and further. The engineers at GM, as well as I'm guessing the procurement department in the AFFFC, I think I said too many Fs. Anyway, they tried to emulate everything about the Mad Cat, and that's where they failed. It was decided that the Rakshasa would be its own machine, or its own copy of one, and was built on the skeleton of another. The mech would carry as similar as possible of a loadout to its clan counterpart, would move just as fast, and would underperform against it if it ever found itself in direct conflict. The first order of business was the speed. General Motors could have gone the route of using MASC, much like the Woodsman did. They instead decided that in order to meet the speed of its counterpart, they would instead do much as the clans had done and mount an extra light engine in the Marauder's frame. While these engineering marvels do have their place, this, in my opinion, was not the place for it, as the Clan XL engine is capable of taking catastrophic damage to a side torso and either continue the fight or at least retreat from the battlefield and fight another day. The inner sphere counterpart would drop like a marionette with its strings cut when it would suffer similar damage. On the subject of catastrophic, mech disabling damage, if the Rakshasa suffered a, well, to put it in a early 21st century term, a sudden unplanned ammunition discharge event inside its torso, the mech lacked cellular ammunition storage case. And the damage from this would not only destroy the torso it was housed in, disabling the Rakshasa, but would also rip its way through the structure and cause the center torso and engine to suffer complete destruction, rendering the machine unsalvageable. It can only get better from here though, right? Well, no. The Rakshasa carried 11.5 tons of armor for protection, giving it 89% of the armor of the Mad Cat, and putting it almost on par with the Mad Cat's predecessor, the Woodsman. Finally, its weapons. Oh, the weapons. This reskinned and heavily modified Marauder would try its best to match the Mad Cat in firepower with an extended range large laser and a medium laser in each arm, an LRM launcher in each torso, both mounting an Artemis 4 fire control system in an attempt to make them as effective as the Mad Cat's LRM-20 launchers. Yeah, they're 20s, not 15s. I should have looked that up. Too late, I already recorded it. And a left torso mounted medium pulse laser, which would be effective against unarmored infantry, something the clans would not use in the initial invasion, and also as a close-in weapon against armored targets. This new mech, the MDG-1A Rakshasa, named for a race of shape-shifting creatures from Hindu and Buddhist beliefs, and shape-shifting, or at least creating a facsimile, was what General Motors had done, turning the Marauder into a Rakshasa as it had attempted to assume the form of a Timberwolf. This attempt, though, was not as successful as the Commonwealth or GM had hoped. The mech had overheating problems, it struggled in fights against its clan counterparts, and was overall poorly regarded by those who received them for their units. There were attempts to make the Rakshasa more effective. The first of these was the 1B variant, which replaced the ER large lasers with standard ones, giving up the extra range of the ER models, in hopes of relieving the heat problems, or at least slightly alleviating them. Then the Rakshasa developed on divergent paths. One which looked to continue to try and make the overall concept work, and one which went its own way. The first of these would be the 2A model, which was developed in 3064. The 2A Rakshasa would seek to change the focus of the machine from being an off-brand Mad Cat to something completely different with a change in the weapons and equipment to make it a mid to short-range brawler. And this was an excellent idea. The Rakshasa would see its entire weapons payload stripped and replaced with a rotary autocannon 5 and a large pulse laser as its primary weapons. These were backed up by a quartet of medium pulse lasers for close-in knife fighting. And this was an effective reimagining of the mech. The other divergent path for the Rakshasa was the 1AR. This was an attempt to make the concept work, and would eventually see service in the Republic Armed Forces, whereas the 2A would only be used in the Federated Suns. The 1AR replaced the ER large lasers with snub-nosed PPCs and the LRM launchers with a multi-missile launcher 7 in each torso, giving it more flexibility at the cost of long-range firepower. This variant also adds much-needed case to the mech for survivability, or I guess salvageability, so that a downed Rakshasa can be recovered after a battle and be put back into the battlefield. You don't have to buy a whole nother mech just because somebody blew up the ammo bin. Of course, looking at the mech, I feel like the 2A is where the Rakshasa has found itself, and isn't just a low-rent clone of the clan machine. It finds a place where the original could not, as a close-range cavalry mech, and is very effective at what it does. I do feel like the mech should be expanded upon, not as an inner sphere incarnation of the Mad Cat, as in the Il Clan era, the Mad Cat is available to just about anyone with enough C-bills, or house bills, or Kerenskys. What are they using now? Like, ever since the whole Comstar fell, you had Republic money, and then, yeah, that's an interesting thing. Somebody should really look into that. Like, what money are people using now? Anyway, since anyone can essentially buy a Mad Cat at this point, the Rakshasa is obsolete, right? I mean, there's no point. But I feel like they could develop further on the 2A, because, once again, if you have the money, you can get the clan toys. Now, before I go into my thoughts on how I would upgrade the Rakshasa for the Il Clan era, I want to let you know about our sponsor, Fortress Miniatures and Games, and if you need a Rakshasa or any other mech or anything for BattleTech, check them out. They have minis, decals, terrain, and so much more. So you can check them out at fortressminiaturesandgames.com. Now, were I to refit the 2A to be even more deadly, I would then look to refit it with some clan weapons, as has become the norm in the current era. I think the main thing I would do is a simple conversion of the machine. Starting with the 2A, I would do a direct swap of all the Inner Sphere energy weapons for their clan counterparts. Not only would this increase the lethality of the mech, but would also give the energy weapons longer ranges and free up a single ton, which could be used to mount Case 2 in the left torso to protect the rotary autocannon ammunition, as well as make the mech capable of surviving an ammunition explosion and continuing to fight, which would sort of put it on par with the clan mechs out there. Not to mention the clan weaponry. But anyway, it would be able to keep on fighting or retreat. And, I mean, technically, once you blow all that ammunition up, then, you know, what's it really matter? Because you're now an energy boat. So, I know in this episode we've talked a lot about the Rakshasa in what can be seen as a disparaging light. And, well, it isn't wrong to do so. But aside from the criticisms, I love this mech. The Rakshasa is one of those mechs that shows the desperation in the Inner Sphere when the clans were steamrolling through their coreward border. And while the FedCom and the Draconis Combine took diverging paths in their attempts to answer this threat, they were trying anything they could. In a way, they were throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. The Rakshasa wasn't the only oddball design to come out of this era, and I think it gets a bad reputation because it wasn't just something designed to answer the threat, but it was an attempt to wholesale copy a design without some of the flexibility that was given to some of its contemporaries. Unlike the Black Hawk, it couldn't get heavier to take advantage of weapons and deal with the disparity in the weights. It couldn't use more advanced technologies. They just didn't have them yet. There were no multi-missile launchers, no MRMs. None of that existed. I mean, to be fair, a good refit of the standard 1A would be to slap MRM 20 launchers in there and call it a day. And maybe if you have some room heat sinks, because that's always been a problem. Anyway. And this mech is something that had to work, no matter how much it didn't. I've heard it said before that that it isn't the machine, but the pilot behind the controls that makes a mech great. In spite of all its shortcomings, the Commonwealth tried to make it work. They issued it to some of their best units, and in the end, the Rakshasa had to shed the trappings of the Timberwolf to become a great mech. Now, if you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening. I'll be posting custom Alpha Strike cards for all the variants of the Rakshasa, as well as a card and record sheet for the Unicorn Company refit of the design to the Patreon for patrons at the Cadet tier and higher. So that pretty much wraps it up. This is a short one. This is just, I wanted to talk about the Rakshasa because I feel like it gets a bad rap. And it's a really fun mech to play. during the FedCom Civil War. Not in the clan invasion. That is just walking out in a tinderbox and waiting to get blown up. So that's it for today. That's it for today. I hope y'all have a good day. Stay safe out there. This is Carrie, signing off. I want to thank all of our patrons who help make this possible. First, at Captain, we have Sarah. And then our lieutenants, Boy in a Box, Gus, Haley, Nathan, and Will. And then our sergeants, BZ Archer, Faz, Steven, and finally our cadets, NB Kaiju, Housemaster Poding, Jamie, and Scott. Thank you all so much for supporting the podcast and the channel. You all make this so possible. Also, I do want to mention once again our sponsor and mercenary liaison, FortressMiniaturesAndGames.com.